Hi, everyone. We're going to continue our close reading of Thomas Hobbes's book, Leviathan. The last video was about chapter 12, his critique of religion and the response to the crisis of divine right. In chapter 13, we are going to have a look at probably the most famous bit of writing that Hobbes ever published with this chapter of the natural condition of mankind as concerning their felicity and misery, or concerning their happiness and misery. So Hobbes is really well known here for introducing this concept of a natural condition or an original condition of mankind. And so the main idea here that I want you to come to grips with is Hobbes's attempt to invite us to think about what human life would have been like in all likelihood before civilization. So, by original condition or natural condition, he means human beings in the state of nature, just trying to fend for themselves without any political institutions to tell them what to do, right? So, we're living in a completely anarchical natural condition with no laws, no rules, no government, no schools, no economy. And you might very reasonably ask, well, why is Hobbes giving us this concept? He's giving us this concept because he believes that in order to really understand the nature of human conflict and war, and to provide a lasting peace to that condition of war, we have to think more closely about what the underlying natural condition of all human beings is at every point in time. Um, Remember, the book Leviathan is a response to the English Civil War, which is a very particular and specific and local conflict. But the book Leviathan is a larger window onto the nature of conflict in humanity in general, right? And the bedrock issue of the social contract will be this fundamental human nature that is relatively unchanging and timeless. All right. So as we will see, and as you've probably concluded for yourself from the readings, Hobbes has a very pessimistic account of human nature, right? We already know from the chapter on the difference of manners that human beings are power hungry egotists, all right? Um, we are interested in power and we're interested in our own well being, our own self interests. And Hobbes doesn't change his mind here in this chapter so much as he um, draws out the logical consequences of that human psychology if one were to be in a situation without any overarching authority. Okay, so that's really the rationale of the piece. He begins the chapter with a few stark claims about the relationship between human beings in this natural condition. And the first issue he has to do with, he investigates, is the likelihood that human beings would enter into antisocial relations of competition with one another. And he thinks the likelihood of that would be rather high in the natural condition. All right, so he writes, nature hath made men so equal in the faculties of body and mind, as that though there be found one man sometimes manifestly stronger in body or of quicker mind than another, yet when all is reckoned together, the difference between man and man is not so considerable as that one man can thereupon claim to himself any benefit, to which another may not pretend as well as he. For as to the strength of body, the weakest has strength enough to kill the strongest, either by secret machination or by confederacy with others that are in the same danger with himself. Okay, so the first argument or postulate really is that human beings are basically by nature equal. We're basically as intelligent as one another, and we're basically as physically fit as one another to survive in the natural condition without any social safety net or any hierarchies. Um, Hobbes does acknowledge that there might be slight differences and deviations with us over our natural ability to survive in nature. But he seems to suggest that because the weakest person might join forces or conspire with stronger forces to kill another, at the end of the day, those differences are basically negligible. It's pretty much a wash. Um, so I just ask you to think about that for a moment. Hobbes seems to be suggesting that because we are equal in the natural state, in the original condition, um, we probably are more inclined to be distrusting and competitive with one another than trusting and collaborative. The reason is that if we are in a condition of scarcity, right? If we don't really know if we're going to have enough food to survive, let's say, or enough shelter to protect us, and I can't really rely on another person to support me in the struggle for survival. The contest for survival amongst equal individuals is going to be a very bitter and fierce competition, right? Because the weaker can conspire through machination to kill the stronger. Um, I just ask you to think for a moment whether or not you think that's plausible. Is it true that if we're equal in nature and we have to sort of agree with Hobbes or accept his premise that we are equal in terms of natural endowment, uh, does it follow from that that the contest for survival amidst lone individuals would be very fierce? Or do you think Hobbes has made a misstep here and that actually people would be more inclined to be social and collaborative? All right. Hobbes is taking the negative view, as he will almost always take the negative view, and argue that the contest for survival is all the more strong. He writes, and so to the faculties of the mind, setting aside the arts granted upon words, and especially that skill of proceeding upon general and infallible rules called science, which very few have, and but in few things, as being not a native faculty born with us, nor attained as prudence, while we look after somewhat else. I find yet a greater equality amongst men than that of strength. For prudence is but experience, which equal time equally bestows on all men, and in those things they equally apply themselves unto. That which may perhaps make such equality incredible is but a vain concept of one's own wisdom, and which almost all men think they have in a greater degree than the vulgar. That is, than all men but themselves and a few others, whom by fame or for concurring with themselves they approve. For such is the nature of men that howsoever they may acknowledge many others to be more witty, or more eloquent, or more learned, yet they will hardly believe there be many so wise as themselves, for they see their own wit at hand and others' men's at a distance. But this proveth rather that men are in that point equal than unequal. For there is not ordinarily a greater sign of the equal distribution of anything than that every man is contented with his share. Okay, so we have a kind of equality of prudence or wisdom. We all sort of, in the natural condition, have the same life experience and the same sort of perspective. And Hobbes is saying it's a very narrow perspective. It's a very narcissistic and egotistical perspective. I'm really just looking out for myself in the natural condition. I can't really concern myself with my neighbors or with any potential friends, right? I'm sort of caught in my own little atomistic worldview in such a state. So this is a philosophical position that Hobbes is associated with, known as egotism, or the belief that human beings are self-seeking or self-interested individuals first, that our fundamental comportment in the world is, if not asocial or antisocial, not particularly social. It is more um, individualistic above all, right, and competitive uh, before collaborative. He writes, from this equality of ability arises equality of hope in the attaining of our ends. Okay, so we all have the same sort of aspirations and ambitions to survive and thrive. And therefore, if any two men desire the same thing, which nevertheless they cannot both enjoy, they become enemies, and in the way to their end, which is principally their own conservation, and sometimes their delectation only, endeavor to destroy or subdue one another. And from hence it comes to pass that when an invader hath no more to fear than another man's single power, if one plant, sow, build, or possess a convenient seat, others may probably be expected to come prepared with forces united to dispossess and deprive him, not only of the fruit of his labor, but also of his life or liberty. And the invader again is in the like danger of another. Now, here's a very important turn in Hobbes's argument about the natural condition, which is to say that because of the natural equality of physical and mental fitness that all people have over the object of our activity, that object is really preservation or survival. Uh, the natural competition amongst individuals over that end will be very intense because there is a finite amount of resources in the natural condition that people can distribute. So if I see food lying in front of me and you see the same food, because we have the equal ability to acquire or appropriate that resource, we are going to be in a position of inevitable conflict with one another. This is a way of thinking about egotistical decision making that has really widespread consequences in modern political science and economics, in particular, the domain of game theory, which portrays individuals as rational, self seeking, and optimizing agents under conditions of constraint, under conditions that compel us, not necessarily because we'd like to, but out of necessity to enter into relations of competition over objects or ends with one another. So the state of nature is a state of really scarce and bitter rivalry over preservation. Now Hobbes will start to describe this psychology that kind of follows from this objective or material condition to invade our subjectivity, and he calls it diffidence or fear, a kind of mistrusting skepticism we would have about each other vis-a-vis survival. He writes, and from this diffidence of one another, there is no way for any man to secure himself so reasonable as anticipation, that is by force or wiles, to master the persons of all men he can, so long till he see no other power great enough to endanger him. And this is no more than his own conservation requireth, and is generally allowed. Also because there be some that taking pleasure in contemplating their own power in the acts of conquest, which they perceive farther than their security requires, if others that otherwise would be glad to be at ease within modest bounds, should not by invasion increase their power, they would not be able, long time, by standing only on their defense, to subsist. And by consequence, such augmentation of dominion over men, being necessary to a man's conservation, it ought to be allowed him. So we're starting to enter a position in which we can only really ever anticipate or expect that everyone around me is trying to, by virtue of their own egotism, get a competitive advantage over me in the quest for survival. I have to be skeptical and mistrustworthy of my neighbor because we're all in this together, and the condition that compels us to fight one another is a very bitter and unforgiving environment, right? So it is unlikely, Hobbes is saying, for people to form alliances and relations of sympathy and mutual admiration in the state of nature. If anything, the state of nature is a very isolating and individuating condition. So he kind of draws a conclusion from this basic asociability and egotism of human beings to argue that really this is the underlying cause of all human conflict, of all human war. He writes, so that in the nature of man, we find three principal causes of quarrel or war. First, competition. We compete over resources. Secondly, diffidence. We don't trust each other because everyone's going to get is going to use their competitive advantage over each other the first chance they get. And third, glory, the fact that we are these vainglorious narcissists who are interested in power. So this is really, at the end of the day, Hobbes's theory of what war comes down to. All human wars are attributable to these fundamental traits that arise from our natural state. Competitiveness over stuff, we want land, we want property, we want wealth. Dividends, mistrusting of other rational actors in their pursuit of stuff. And glory, the desire to see the total amount of power we enjoy expand over time continuously. Um, so this has deep ramifications for all social contracts because if the idea of a commonwealth is going to be that individuals have to come together into a multiplicity or into a unity, um, it seems to be a deep problem for all political forms of authority as to how we are going to incentivize individuals who don't trust one another to enter into some kind of relation of shared respect and submission to a common law. All right, so this is really Hobbes' kind of recognition of the problem. Um, so just to move forward a little bit, Hobbes asks us to think through some of the ramifications of what a state of nature would be like. And he basically argues that the state of nature is a state of total war, of everyone at war with everyone in this bitter fight for survival. Um, so you have to remember, in the back of your head when you're reading this chapter, that Hobbes is kind of using this concept of the natural condition as a comparison with the very real circumstance of civil war in England, right? Which to his mind was a state comparable to the state of nature, inasmuch as the force of the law no longer seemed to be doing its work of governing, of getting people to fear and submit to a common power. So the state of nature is a kind of explication or extrapolation of the real event of the Civil War to a logical theory of human conflict at the most general and universal level. Hobbes writes, "Whatsoever therefore is consequent to a time of war, where every man is enemy to every man," right? Where everyone's an enemy of everyone. The same is consequent to the time wherein men live without other security than what their own strength and their own invention shall furnish them withal. And in such condition there is no place for industry, because the fruit thereof is uncertain, and consequently no culture of the earth, no navigation nor use of the commodities that may be imported by sea, no commodious building, no instruments of moving and removing such things as require much force, no knowledge of the face of the earth, no account of time, no arts, no letters, no society, and which is worst of all, continual fear and danger of violent death, and the life of man, solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. So the state of nature, the natural condition, is a terrible condition. There is no economy for me to pursue my desire for power and material objects. There is no knowledge of the world in which I live. There's no science. There's no infrastructure to protect me. No government to impose laws that might stop my neighbors from trying to kill me. So really the only quality of life I can expect in such a natural state is total chaos and total anarchy, and probably a very short, lonely, and violent life. Right. So Hobbes is really holding the state of nature in front of us as a kind of threat, in a way. He is saying, in the absence of a sovereign power, of a sovereign authority, in a condition that is totally free, I really have no quality of life to pursue my own best ends, right? The natural condition is a totally negative condition. There is no reason to desire the absence of a common authority. All right. So this is Hobbes's first way of trying to incentivize us to see that the alternative to the state of nature, i.e., a common authority or a sovereign power, is a much preferable social form of organization than the lack or absence of sovereign authority, right? Uh, he writes, "It may seem strange to some man that has not well weighed these things, that nature should thus dissociate and render men apt to invade and destroy one another. And he may therefore, not trusting to this inference made from the passions, desire perhaps to have the same confirmed by experience. Let him therefore consider with himself when taking a journey. He arms himself and seeks to go well accompanied. When going to sleep, he locks his doors. When even in his house, he locks his chests. And this when he knows there be laws and public officers armed, to revenge all injuries shall be done him. What opinion he has of his fellow subjects when he rides armed, of his fellow citizens when he locks his doors, and of his children and servants when he locks his chests? Does he not there as much accuse mankind of his actions as I do by my words? But neither of us accuse man's nature in it. The desires and other passions of man are, in themselves, no sin. No more are the actions that proceed from those passions, till they know a law that forbids them, which till laws but be made they cannot know. Nor can any law be made till they have agreed upon the person that shall make it." Okay, this is kind of the final point. It's very easy to misread Hobbes here in this chapter as saying that human beings are by nature evil, and that we're just kind of chomping at the bit to be violent with one another. He's not really saying that. He's just saying that the force and violence that we enact and bring about is just a necessary consequence of real material conditions of competition and scarcity. He's saying that our nature is basically amoral. There is no real original moral compass that would orient us. What we have to do is figure out what kind of person, what kind of political leader will instill us with some kind of law that will, in effect, be the glue that forces us to give up our right to all things in nature. That is, to start treating each other as citizens rather than obstacles to our survival. So, how are we going to enter into some kind of agreement over a common person that will make the law? This is now Hobbes's big dilemma, right? We're in the state of nature that is anarchy, where there are no laws, and we don't want to be in that state. That state is nasty, brutish, and short. So, how are we going to enter into some form of social arrangement that will provide enough footing and enough security that I can pursue my own best interests in a more satisfying and durable way? And the answer to that for Hobbes will be the social contract, which authorizes the sovereign to rule over us as an absolute authority. All right, so this will be sort of the argument in the next chapter. He will sort of delineate different contracts that enjoin subjects to enter into a multitude that submits to the power of the sovereign, who is, in a way, the representative chosen to impose social cohesion and order through the power of the law. All right. So Hobbes is walking us from the negative and anarchic condition of nature to the stable and secure situation of security and self-interested egotism under the sovereign. All right. That is really the direction that the Leviathan is taking for Hobbes. So we'll continue next time with chapter 14, which is called Of the First and Second Natural Laws and of Contracts. And this will be where Hobbes tries to, from a few fundamental natural concepts, build an idea of natural law that provides the building blocks, as it were, for a social contract that all individual egotistical actors would be inclined to agree with, right? He is not going to try to elevate social nature or the natural condition of human beings, but rather to propose a contract that is amenable to that fundamental underlying nature. All right. So we'll have a look at the natural laws and the contract stuff in the next video. Please try to review the natural condition and be clear on the natural condition as a state of competition by individuals within a condition of scarcity, and try to think through the rationale for why we might be inclined to prefer a conception of a commonwealth with laws rather than an anarchical condition without any laws. This is really the engine of Hobbes's argument, as it were. All right. Until next time.